What if you woke up on the morning of your wedding and discovered you had lived this life before? What if you could hear the thoughts no one dared to speak? Your sister's envy? Your husband's secrets? Your family's betrayals? Would you let fate repeat itself? Or would you risk everything to rewrite the ending? The Wedding of Lies. I woke up on the morning of my wedding with a secret I had no right to carry. The chandeliers of the Whitmore estate glittered above me, the corridors echoed with servants rushing, and yet the only sound I truly heard was not in the air at all. It was in my head, whispers that did not belong to me. Thoughts, raw and unspoken, crawling into my mind as if the world itself had cracked open. The first voice was familiar, too familiar. My sister, Isabella. Her smile was sugar, her eyes soft, but her mind was venom. This time, I'll steal the sweetest husband before anyone else can. I froze. She was across the table, lips unmoving, laughter spilling into the room like polished silver. But the words had been clear as day. How could I hear them? Why me and why today? There in that gilded dining hall, a mystery began that would drag me into the deepest, darkest corners of my own fate. It was supposed to be a celebration, the great Whitmore Parker arrangement, whispered about across the Atlantic. Two sisters presented to two heirs of the Parker dynasty, a deal woven not in love, but in empire. For Isabella and me, this was our trial by fire. For the Parkers, it was the solidification of power. The heirs sat across from us. Finian Parker, the eldest, his presence colder than marble. He was already a legend in New York, cutthroat in the boardroom, unreadable in life. His eyes gave nothing. And Leonard Parker, the younger, born of scandal, raised in shadows, but dressed in charm like a well-tailored suit. He leaned back in his chair, lips curved in that easy smile, every inch the gentleman the gossip columns adored. Two men, two doors into the future. Only one step would seal my fate. In another life, one I should not remember, yet do, I had chosen Leonard. And for a time, I thought I was happy. He doted on me, he cherished me, and I let myself believe in the lie. But then came the poison, the inheritance, and finally the crash. The car that shattered my bones, driven by none other than Isabella, drunk with envy. We both died, and I thought it was over. But it wasn't. Somehow I had awoken in this body again, at this table, on this exact morning. And now, with this terrifying new gift, I knew the truth. Isabella had awoken too. She remembered everything, just as I did. Her thoughts betrayed her. I'll take Leonard. You can suffer in Finian's cold hands. The words struck like glass splinters. In the past, it was Finian who had destroyed her, not me. He had been her husband, her tormentor, her downfall. But she didn't know what I knew. She didn't remember the poison in Leonard's smile, the serpentine sweetness that turned into chains. I sat still, my pulse thundering. I wanted to laugh at the cruel irony. Isabella thought she was clever, outmaneuvering me. But she was only rushing toward the very cage she once despised. Then my father's voice cut through the tension, heavy with command. "Rachel," he said, "since your sister has chosen Leonard, you'll marry Finian." A decision, a sentence. The room tilted, every glance turning toward me. My sister's lips curled in victory, but her thoughts screamed louder. Now you'll be the one beaten, the one cast aside. This time, it's you who will be broken. I smiled, a small, quiet smile. One that no one understood. If only she knew what I knew. If only she could hear Leonard's thoughts the way I could. His hunger, his vanity, the little flicker of cruelty behind his polished eyes. I turned my gaze to Finian. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at anyone. His silence pressed down on me like snow, cold and suffocating, but oddly comforting. It was better than the honeyed poison of Leonard. It was real. In that moment, the world snapped. The line of fate bent sharply, cutting me off from everything familiar. There was no going back. I felt the weight of every guest, every servant, every whisper in that grand hall. To them, I was the unlucky daughter, bound to a man colder than winter, while Isabella basked in the glow of the charming younger son. But I carried something no one else did. I carried memory. I carried foresight. And now, I carried the weapon of their thoughts. I let my fingers brush the edge of the table, grounding myself, and whispered to no one but me. This time, I will not be broken. This time, I will rewrite the ending. The chandeliers above flickered, casting long shadows across the room. It felt almost like a warning, or perhaps an invitation. What happens when two sisters share the same memory of the future? What happens when both are willing to kill for a better fate? Isabella believed she had won. She believed Leonard's hand was the key to her salvation. But I knew better. I had lived this story once before. I had worn the crown of a doomed bride, and I had died for it. Not this time. This time, I chose silence over sweetness, steel over silk. Finian Parker, the man everyone feared, would become my husband. And though the room thought me the weaker sister, though my father thought me disposable, I had already begun to weave a different future. The first act of my new life began with that quiet smile and with the secret echo of a thought that wasn't mine. And so the stage was set. Two sisters, two men, one empire, one secret that could tear us all apart. Do you want to know how it ends? Then listen closely. Because the true story doesn't start with love. It starts with betrayal. And betrayal always demands blood. The Silent Pact. The wedding was over, but the silence in my new home was louder than any vow spoken that day. I stood in the doorway of Finian Parker's penthouse suite. The skyline of New York stretched beyond the glass, glittering like an indifferent universe. He was there, untying his tie, his face unreadable, his movements as precise as a man dismantling a bomb. And me? I was the bride who didn't believe in romance. I was the woman who carried memories of a past life where love had ended in poison and fire, so I spoke the only truth I knew. We don't have to pretend, Finian. Not with each other. Let's not play lovers. Let's be allies. He looked at me then, his eyes narrowing, his silence pressing like frost against my skin. For a heartbeat, I thought he would laugh or dismiss me. Instead, he said, "Clever. I can agree to that." Was it relief I felt? Or dread? What kind of marriage begins with an agreement not to love? What kind of future can two strangers build on silence? The questions circled me like vultures, but I swallowed them whole. Survival was my only vow now. From that night forward, I kept myself busy with small acts of defiance against fate. I cooked breakfast, not because I thought it would melt his heart, but because I refused to be like Isabella, demanding, entitled, always waiting for the world to serve her. I studied late into the night, textbooks and online courses stacked across my desk, while Finian came and went without a word. Each silence from him became a puzzle. Was it disdain? Or was silence simply his language? Days bled into weeks. I learned to read the rhythms of the Parker household, the cold nods of staff, the sharp appraisals of Lady Eleanor, the matriarch whose approval meant survival. She watched me with the eyes of a hawk, waiting for me to stumble. I knew one misstep could cast me out, humiliated, just as Isabella had been in another life. But if Isabella had failed, why couldn't I succeed? And yet, just as I began to steady myself, the first fissure of conflict widened. At a family dinner, beneath the crystal chandeliers of the Parker estate, Isabella leaned forward, her laughter too sweet, her eyes locked on me like sharpened glass. "Rachel," she said, her voice lilting for the benefit of the guests, "you seem so restrained. Do you even enjoy being married to a man who doesn't notice you?" The table went still. Forks paused midair. My chest tightened, but before I could reply, I heard the voice that wasn't spoken. Leonard's thoughts, clear as a knife. "She's becoming more trouble than she's worth." I nearly choked. He was speaking about her, not me. My sister, who thought she had won, was already unraveling in his mind. And she didn't know it. She sat there, smiling triumphantly, believing she had shamed me, while the man she clung to silently dismissed her as a burden. What would you do if you alone could hear the truth no one else dared to speak? Would you expose it and risk everything, or keep it as a weapon, waiting for the right strike? I chose silence. For now. Instead, I lifted my glass and smiled politely at Isabella. "I enjoy what I have, sister. Quiet can be more valuable than noise." A murmur swept the table, half amused, half intrigued. Isabella's eyes flashed with fury, though she masked it quickly. I had survived this round, but the war had only just begun. The days that followed stretched like taut wire. Finian remained as cold as ever, but I began to see slivers of something else. When he warned me not to walk alone, his voice low and measured, was that concern? When he lingered at the dining table, listening as I discussed Parker investments with the elders, was that respect? And if silence was his shield, what was mine? A warm welcome to you all from Dran. If you've come this far with me into the Parker family's secrets, I ask you to stay. Subscribe to Dran, because the story only grows darker, the stakes only climb higher, and your support gives us the strength to keep telling these tales that unravel the shadows of power, betrayal, and survival. Back in that house, the tension grew. I carried the burden of 2 lives, the memory of everything that had gone wrong, and the chilling knowledge that Isabella's envy burned hotter with each passing day. She wanted me to fail. She needed me to fall. But every humiliation she planned became a stage for me to play the opposite role. At charity luncheons, where she laughed too loudly and clung too desperately to Leonard's arm, I kept my words measured, my dress modest, my smile steady, and I saw the elders' eyes shift. I saw the whispers turn. Isabella thought herself dazzling, but what dazzles can also blind. I chose to be the steady flame, less visible, harder to extinguish. Yet I could feel it coming. The confrontation we were both circling toward, like wolves around the same carcass. She had her husband's name, her painted smile, her brittle charm. I had silence, memory, and the weapon of truth whispered into my mind. Which one of us would the Parkers keep? Which one of us would the Empire devour? The question haunted me every night as I studied reports of failing Parker subsidiaries, already sensing where my true battleground would lie. The dinner tables, the polite smiles, the cutting remarks, they were only preludes. The real war was waiting in numbers, in contracts, in boardrooms where futures were signed away. And in that quiet, as Finian walked past me one evening, his voice calm, his words simple, "Don't go out alone. Some in this family will test you." I felt the first flicker of something I had not expected. A shift. A possibility. What happens when the man you once feared becomes the only one who sees the danger before it strikes? What happens when silence itself begins to feel like protection? The night closed around me with questions I could not yet answer. But I knew this. Isabella believed the game was hers to win. She did not see the cracks forming beneath her feet. And me? I had nothing but my wits, my silence, and the stolen whispers of their thoughts. It wasn't much. But sometimes the smallest blade cuts the deepest. The war for survival had begun, and I would not lose. The gamble of power. The contract lay on the mahogany table like a loaded gun. Its pages gleamed white under the chandelier, but every line was a trap, carefully designed to strip me bare if this marriage ever collapsed. A modest allowance, a single property, nothing more. It was a cage disguised as generosity. Eleanor Parker's voice was as crisp as the ink. "Sign it, Rachel. It is standard. No daughter-in-law enters this family without protection. Protection for us, not for you." I should have trembled. I should have folded the way Isabella once did, but something inside me burned colder than fear. Hadn't I already lived the ending of this game? Hadn't I already died once, ruined by choices made out of naivety? This was my second chance, and second chances are never meant for the timid. I looked up. "I don't want an allowance," I said, steady. "Or a house." The air in the room stilled. Eleanor raised an eyebrow. Finian, seated at the far end, lifted his gaze for the first time all evening. Isabella smirked, already preparing her mockery. "What do you want, then?" Eleanor asked, her tone a dagger hidden behind silk. I slid the contract back toward her. "Give me control of Parker Enterprises' third subsidiary. If I succeed in turning it profitable within a year, I want 10% of its shares. If I fail, I walk away with nothing." A gasp escaped Isabella before she could stop herself. Leonard's hand tightened on his glass, and Eleanor's sharp eyes narrowed, studying me as if she were dissecting a rare insect. "Subsidiary 3?" she repeated. "That corpse? No one touches it. No one can." "Then you lose nothing if I fail," I said softly. "But if I succeed, you gain a weapon you didn't know you had." For a moment, silence pressed down on all of us, thick as velvet. Then, unexpectedly, Finian chuckled. The sound was low, dangerous, and strangely approving. "Let her try," he said. "If she can bring that ruin back to life, she deserves her stake." Why did he side with me? Was it curiosity? Amusement? Or something colder still? A desire to see how far I would go before I broke? I didn't ask. I signed. And with that stroke of a pen, I threw myself into a storm no one believed I could survive. The office I inherited was a tomb. Dust gathered in the corners, papers piled untouched, employees moving like ghosts in a graveyard of ambition. Subsidiary 3 wasn't just failing, it was rotting. And yet, what is failure but the perfect disguise for opportunity? I rolled up my sleeves. I cut redundant staff, not out of cruelty, but necessity. I restructured departments, hired young analysts hungry for a chance. I rewrote marketing strategies, reshaped supply chains. Every night, I stayed until dawn, combing through figures, chasing margins, searching for cracks I could widen into doors. But success never comes without blood, and the first strike against me was swift. It happened on a Friday. The fire alarms screamed, sprinklers drenching the office, drowning years of records in a single storm of water. Staff panicked, papers dissolved into pulp, and chaos reigned. By the time I arrived, the smell of wet ink and despair filled the air. Someone had planned this. Someone wanted me buried under drowned documents. That night, as I walked through the Parker Mansion's hall, Isabella's voice rang in my head, though her lips were sealed. Let's see how she runs a company without records. She had made her move, but she didn't know what I had prepared. I had digital backups, off-site storage, redundancies she couldn't touch. Within a week, my analysts reconstructed what we had lost. Operations resumed, and whispers began to circulate. Perhaps she isn't as weak as we thought. But wasn't that the most dangerous kind of whisper? The kind that breeds attention? No sooner had I regained momentum than another test arrived. A bouquet of crimson roses appeared on my desk. No card, no sender. The receptionist claimed a man had delivered them, insisting it was gratitude for saving his company. Gratitude? Or bait? I stared at the roses, their petals lush and red, their thorns gleaming like knives. In another life, Isabella had received gifts like these: scandals hidden in perfume, traps set in blossoms, photos leaked, rumors spread, and reputations burned. So I had them thrown out. I would not fall for it. That evening, Finian returned home earlier than usual. He poured himself a drink, then glanced at me. "Who sent you flowers?" "I don't know," I said evenly. "I had them destroyed." His eyes lingered on me, searching for cracks. Then he nodded once. Smart. Was that approval or suspicion? The pressure mounted with each passing day. Every small victory at the subsidiary drew sharper eyes, deeper scrutiny. Eleanor began to ask about my progress at dinner, her spoon pausing midair as she demanded numbers. Isabella scraped her fork against porcelain, seething. Leonard smiled too broadly, but his thoughts hissed beneath the surface. She's dangerous. She has to be stopped. How long could I keep walking this knife's edge? How long before one misstep sent me plummeting? But here's the truth. The knife's edge was the only place I had ever truly lived. So I leaned into it. I embraced the danger, the late nights, the endless calculations. Every time the world tried to break me, I found a new way to stand taller. And as the third month closed, the numbers told a story no one could ignore. Losses cut by 20%. 2 former investors returned. Orders climbed. Subsidiary 3, once a corpse, was breathing again. At the next Parker dinner, I delivered my report with calm precision. The elders murmured. Eleanor's gaze sharpened. Finian raised his glass in the faintest acknowledgement. Across the table, Isabella's hand trembled as she clutched Leonard's sleeve. Her thoughts clawed at me, wild and furious. She won't win. She can't. I'll ruin her if it kills me. But she was already too late. The board was shifting. The empire was listening. And I had only just begun. What would you do if the very family that despised you began to depend on you? Would you falter under the weight or rise to claim the power they never intended for you to hold? I knew my answer. The gamble had been made, and against all odds, I was winning. But victories are dangerous things. They don't end battles, they spark wars. And the war for the Parker Empire had only just drawn its first blood. The Masquerade of Betrayal. The night of the gala shimmered with chandeliers and false smiles. The Parker family had spared no expense. Velvet curtains, champagne towers, senators and tycoons brushing shoulders. It was a stage set not for celebration, but for judgment, for every guest was waiting to see which branch of the Parker dynasty would rise and which would rot. I entered on Finian's arm, my gown a modest shade of champagne, my steps steady despite the whispers that followed us. Every eye compared me to Isabella, who arrived moments later draped in crimson, her perfume thick, her laughter louder than the string quartet. She clung to Leonard as though the room itself might swallow her without him. The night began in elegance, but I felt the tension coil beneath every glass raised. Power is never still, never silent. It lurks, it waits, it hunts. Then, like a crack splitting marble, it began. A shout cut through the music. Heads turned as a man stormed the hall, a tablet clutched in his fist. "Is this how the Parker family conducts business?" he demanded. Security lunged, but he was faster. With one swipe, the screen lit up for all to see. Leaked financial documents, private emails, evidence of layoffs and backroom deals. Gasps rose like a tide. Conversations fractured into panic. My chest clenched. This was no accident. Someone had orchestrated this strike to cripple us at the very moment when the family's reputation was laid bare. Eleanor Parker's face turned pale beneath the glittering lights. "Find the source," she hissed. Finian's phone vibrated. He glanced down, then up at me, his expression carved from stone. "It came from Leonard's device," he said. The hall froze. 1,000 eyes shifted. Isabella staggered back, her face drained of color. "No, that's impossible," she cried. Leonard would never. But Leonard's expression betrayed him. He took one step away from her, shaking his head. "I didn't send it. I left my tablet at home last night. You used it, didn't you?" The words struck harder than any slap. Isabella's lips parted, but no sound came. Her eyes flickered wildly between Leonard and me, as if searching for an escape that no longer existed. Eleanor's voice sliced through the chaos. "Escort them out." Guards moved swiftly. Isabella thrashed, her shrieks echoing across the ballroom. "It was her," she screamed, pointing at me. "Rachel planned this. She's framing me. Don't you see?" But no one listened. Her protests dissolved beneath the weight of scandal. Leonard struggled too, insisting on his innocence, but the evidence clung to him like chains. As they were dragged from the hall, I stood motionless, every heartbeat a drumbeat of disbelief and inevitability. Had I orchestrated this? No. But hadn't I sensed it coming? Hadn't I heard the restless thoughts, the whispers of betrayal circling closer each day? The Parker family's guests dispersed in hushed shock. Reputations had been shattered, futures rewritten in the span of minutes. I remained, silent yet blazing inside, the storm contained within a single calm smile. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like. It may seem like a small action, but for us, it's a huge encouragement that fuels our passion to bring you even more captivating real-life stories. Back in the mansion, the aftermath burned like embers. Eleanor summoned me to her study, her expression unreadable, her hands folded tightly on her desk. "You knew," she said. I met her gaze. I suspected, but suspicion is not proof. I waited. She studied me for a long moment, then leaned back, a thin smile ghosting her lips. "Colder than you look. Good, you'll need that." Her words chilled me more than any accusation. Colder than I look. Was that a blessing or a warning? That night, Finian found me in the study, where papers and reports lay scattered across the desk. He stood in the doorway, watching me, his face still and unreadable. "You handled yourself well," he said at last. "I did what I had to do. And what will you do next?" I looked at him, my voice steady, though my pulse raced. "The family is wounded. Scandal leaves scars, but scars can harden into armor. I intend to rebuild, stronger than before." For a heartbeat, silence stretched. Then Finian nodded. Then we rebuild together. It was the closest he had ever come to an offer of partnership, but even as hope flickered, fear shadowed it. For every victory demands a price. Isabella was gone, Leonard disgraced, but enemies have a way of surviving in silence. They wait, they plot, they strike when least expected. What if this was only the beginning? What if the real war had yet to start? My hands trembled as I gathered the papers. Not from weakness, but from the weight of what lay ahead. I had won a battle tonight, yes. But in the Parker family, battles are never ends, they are only preludes. The gala had begun with glitter and laughter. It ended in betrayal, humiliation, and exile. And while I stood unbroken, I knew the next storm was already gathering, darker than the last. Because secrets never stay buried. And in this family, betrayal is never truly over. The Iron Bride. The mansion had grown quieter since Isabella and Leonard were cast out, but silence in the Parker family was never peace. It was tension disguised, a breath held too long, the pause before another strike. Yet for the first time in both of my lives, I did not fear the silence. I owned it. Eleanor summoned me one morning to the glass house, sunlight spilling across rows of orchids. She stood among them, tall and regal, her hands clasped behind her back. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, turning to me, she spoke words I had never expected. You've proven yourself. From now on, you will represent the Parker name at the foundation, at charity galas, at public events. You will be our face. It was not affection. It was recognition, a passing of a torch sharpened by expectation. And yet, something inside me cracked open at those words. In another life, I had been discarded, invisible, unworthy of even a second glance. Now I was being placed at the forefront, trusted with the family's reputation. The irony was almost cruel, but I accepted it. That evening, Finian walked with me through the garden. The air was cool, the lamps glowing faintly against the hedges. He stopped suddenly, his gaze fixed on me with an intensity that made it hard to breathe. "My mother sees you as her successor," he said. "And what do you see?" I asked. He paused, then answered quietly. "I see someone who was underestimated, someone I was wrong about." For a man like Finian, who hid his heart behind walls of iron, those words struck deeper than any declaration of love. They were not poetic. They were not sweet. They were simply true. And truth, after everything I had endured, was the rarest gift of all. Later that night, in the stillness of our room, he surprised me again. He set aside his papers, sat beside me, and spoke with a gravity that made my chest tighten. "No more marriage of convenience, Rachel. You've built something real, not just for the company, but between us. I don't want to live as strangers anymore." For a moment, the past pressed against me. The memories of abuse, betrayal, death. My instinct was to recoil, to doubt, to protect myself. And yet, hadn't I spent this second life carving out something stronger? Hadn't I proven that fate was not a cage, but a challenge? "I need time," I whispered. "You'll have it," he said. And that was enough. Because sometimes love doesn't arrive with fireworks or thunder. Sometimes it comes in the quiet promise of patience. Weeks passed and my role grew. I oversaw the Parker Foundation, launched scholarships, expanded investments into sustainable energy. For every move I made, the media painted me as something new, the steel magnolia of the Parker dynasty. But titles meant less to me than the look in the eyes of those who once doubted me. Respect. Reluctant at first, then undeniable. Isabella returned once, cloaked in desperation. She wept, claiming Leonard had manipulated her, begging me for forgiveness. Her voice cracked, her hands shook, her tears glittered in the light. Once, I might have believed her. Once, I might have softened. But I had heard her thoughts before. I had felt the venom she carried. "You taught me how to survive," I told her quietly, "and I will never forget that, but I will never let you near my life again." She left, her sobs fading into silence. And with her departure, the last ghost of my past life faded too. One evening, as I worked late in the study, Finian entered with 2 cups of tea. He set one down beside me, then leaned back in his chair, studying me. "Do you regret it?" he asked. "Regret what?" "This life. The choices. Marrying me." I looked at him for a long time, the firelight casting shadows across his face. At first, the answer had been yes. At first, I had feared every breath beside him. But now the answer was different. "No," I said, "not anymore." He reached for my hand then, not as a demand, but as an offering. And for the first time, I didn't pull away. In that simple gesture, I understood something I had never dared to believe. I had not just rewritten my fate. I had built a future, one of steel, yes, but also of peace. And so, my story did not end with betrayal or tragedy. It ended with choice. The choice to rise where I had once fallen. The choice to carve strength from pain. The choice to love, not because I needed to, but because I wanted to. Being reborn was never about reliving the past. It was about reclaiming it, reshaping it, and finally releasing it. So if you find yourself broken, remember this. You are not trapped in the story someone else wrote for you. You can write your own. And sometimes, the second chance you've been waiting for is not a miracle. It is simply the moment you decide you deserve better. That was the lesson I carried as I walked beside Finian through the quiet halls of the Parker estate, hand in hand, no longer strangers. Not fragile, not replaceable. Iron wrapped in silk. And that, perhaps, is the most powerful ending of all. In the end, the story of Rachel Whitmore and the Parker dynasty is not just a tale of wealth, betrayal, and second chances. It is a mirror held up to the struggles many of us face in quieter ways. Rachel was forced into a marriage she did not want, into a family that doubted her, into a life where every mistake was magnified. Yet instead of breaking, she chose to bend, to adapt, to think strategically. She took the very tools meant to trap her, contracts, silence, suspicion, and turned them into weapons of survival. What began as a life of fear and compromise slowly transformed into a life of respect, power, and even love. Her journey reminds us that survival is not about brute strength or loud defiance. It is about endurance, self-control, and the courage to seize small opportunities even when the world is against you. Rachel's power did not come from shouting down her enemies. It came from listening, from reading the room, from moving when others thought she was still. She proved that dignity and patience, when wielded wisely, can be sharper than any blade. But perhaps the deepest lesson lies in how she chose to handle her second chance. She could have repeated old mistakes, allowed bitterness to guide her, or wasted her new life seeking revenge. Instead, she turned her pain into a foundation for growth. She learned, she adapted, and she never lost sight of her ultimate goal. Not just survival, but self-respect. And isn't that what many of us crave in our own lives? We may not live in mansions or fight for control of empires, but we all know what it feels like to be underestimated, to carry scars from betrayal, to feel trapped by choices that seem beyond our control. Rachel's story reminds us that even when the past weighs heavily, we are not bound to repeat it. Change comes when we decide to act differently, when we choose courage over fear, strategy over despair, and resilience over surrender. So the question for each of us is simple. What would you do with your second chance? Would you waste it, or would you build something unshakable from the ruins of your past? That is the heart of this story, and perhaps the heart of life itself. If this reflection has stirred something in you, remember, lessons only matter when we carry them into our daily lives. Face challenges with calm, treat your setbacks as teachers, and know that every decision, no matter how small, can be the turning point to a different ending. And now, I warmly invite you to join the Dran community, where more stories like this await. Stories that challenge, inspire, and remind us of our own hidden strength. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to the channel. It may seem like a small action, but for us, it is the fuel that drives us to keep creating meaningful, captivating content for you. Together, let's continue this journey.